Hello and welcome to the CFO Playbook podcast. I'm David McClelland. I'm a journalist and broadcaster. I cover technology and business with special interest in startups. And here on CFO Playbook, we get under the skin of how world-class finance leaders from across various industries set goals, manage teams, leverage technology, plan for the future, and much, much more. In today's episode, we're leaning into the practical challenges and opportunities that come with leading finance teams across diverse geographies and cultures, as we speak with CFO Huiming Chen.
When a crazy idea works, it's called innovation. When a crazy idea doesn't work, it's called experiment. And both are good things, right? Because you have to have these things go hands in hand. Experiment is there, so one day innovation can be achieved. So we have to keep that open mind and have those mindset so that we progress.
If you're listening to CFO Playbook for the first time, then welcome. Don't forget to subscribe, have a listen through our extensive back catalogue. We're well into our 4th season of the show now. And do get in touch. Let us know what or who you'd like us to speak to in a future episode. Right, on with the show.
This episode of the CFO Playbook is brought to you by Soldo. Thousands of businesses from small to large corporations, including Mercedes-Benz, Sony, and Get Your Guide, use Soldo to make their business spending simple and efficient. To find out more or to book a demo, visit soldo.com.
Huiming Chen is a finance leader with experience across pharmaceutical, medical devices, and biotechnology. Hailing from China and currently based in London, she's a chartered global management accountant and fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. Following a decade at GE and GE Healthcare in senior finance positions, she's now CFO for DNA sequencing leader Illumina's European commercial business. Huiming Chen, thank you for joining us on CFO Playbook podcast.
Thank you, David.
Where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from the sunny North London area, so couldn't be best. I'm very happy for today's weather.
It is delightful to be outside today, but I'm grateful that you're inside, at least for the next 40 or so minutes, chatting with us today.
Absolutely.
For several decades, perhaps as long as I've been alive, our world appeared to shrink. Trade and cultural barriers came down. The internet, cloud and mobile technology made doing business in Dubai, Dallas or Delhi just as easy as doing it down the road. However, in the last handful of years, we've seen something of a cooling of global accord in some areas. Some trade bridges have been raised. In other cases, they've been burnt. And for a variety of reasons, what was once a one-world optimism has become more fragmented, certainly more complicated. Huiming, you're very much a global citizen, I think I'd call you, having lived and worked in US, UK, Europe, and of course China, where you're from, and held leadership positions in multinationals with responsibility for global finance teams. So what's your approach on managing global teams from different cultures? How do you help to steer them all in the same direction, even though culturally their approaches might be somewhat different?
Yeah, no, that is indeed a question dear to my heart, because of my multinational journey and career. So you mentioned about the world is getting a bit more complicated now, okay, with some of these political changes. But to me, I think from the workplace, it's actually getting closer and closer in terms of the cultural integration, which is probably a bit counterintuitive. But if you think about in the past few years, especially after the pandemic and during the pandemic, we were in a bit cut off physically, okay, for the international interaction. But in the virtual world, it's actually getting a lot more closer to all of this interaction. Because at the moment, even though you are not physically interacting in a foreign country, but online, we are still interacting even more with people and colleagues from around the world. So from that front, back to your question on how are we going to adjust this global dynamics, especially when we are working in international firm or multinational firms. So I think the way that I looked at it is, first of all, as a leader, we have to acknowledge the differences across the different geography. on how people come up, how they grow up, their style, their tendency of communication has all different nuances. So as a leader, we have to acknowledge that difference so that we can make ourselves flexible to adapt to the other side. And then from the employee engagement side, is also we foster a very open dialogue among the team, because they are all from different culture, different geography. So for example, my current team, my direct report, I think we have like close to 10 nationalities, on the team. So in this case, how do we foster an environment for people to openly talk about? Because only openness can then limit or minimize any miscommunication when we are coming into interaction and driving result and driving changes.
In terms of team structures there, and like you, I've worked in some different environments. I've worked with outsourcing companies in India and Thailand, and also worked with teams in China, as well as in the States and in Western Europe. From a kind of team and structural point of view, there are differences that can play out culturally. Some teams work very well in more of a flatter structure, whereas some cultures, some teams seem to work better or more naturally in a more hierarchical structure. So how do you balance out those different constructs, the different scaffoldings that culturally some teams might need in order to operate at their best?
So here it comes about, again, the awareness of the fact that you just described, because, to our amazement, actually not everyone is well aware of this. So I think point number one is we have to be aware of those differences. And second, we have to also be self-aware, okay? The point one is externally aware. The point two is self-aware. And then the reason we say self-aware is because we have to also articulate really well how it was as a leader, as a team to operate, so that the other side, no matter who you are interacting with, has a good understanding on how we do things or how the other side do things, so that they don't take things for granted. Because when it comes to cultural differences, that's one very dangerous thing that we should minimize or avoid is the stereotype. Because people will tend to think, people from Asian culture is very quiet. And maybe people from another country, they are super outspoken. So those are, in a way, stereotype, but in the broader context, it has a little bit merit in it. But what is more important is to actually unpick the individual styles as well. And that's why here comes into that self-awareness is very, very critical. Because let's say I come from China, but probably I wouldn't view myself will fit very much the Chinese stereotype, because I have my own life experience that actually shaping me into who I am today. And you never know who you are interacting with the other side, whether they are from the Netherlands or they are from the US. You may have a thinking in the background that they may react to another way, but it's never too late or it's never any issue to ask the other side and make the dialogue open. And that is the key secret in how I navigate in all of those potential tensions or misunderstanding in the workplace.
We're speaking about culture here and being culturally sensitive, culturally aware, and ensuring that you are managing the person, not the stereotype. That's one lens on culture. But then the other lens that we talk about as leaders very often is creating a culture. What is the culture of the organization that we work in that helps ensure that people are all pulling in that same direction? Are there challenges in communicating that culture of your organization to different cultures to get everyone going in the same direction? Or actually is it quite simple? Your North Star is your North Star, whichever part of the world you're looking at it from.
That's actually a super good point, David, because one thing that really amazed me, in all my international experience is sometimes, and most of the time, actually the corporate culture, like the firm that you are in, that culture is probably more important than the individual national culture. Because let's say I spent so long in GE and GE Healthcare, so there is a certain culture, right, in that organization that people, no matter where you are coming from, but we all know, okay, that is the GE way to get things done. So now I'm in Illumina. So Illumina also has this culture. And then people will know it is different, right, to my previous GE culture. That when people know, okay, this is how things get done in the Illumina culture. And in this case, whether you are employees that are in European countries or you are employees in the Asian countries, you follow some sort of overarching protocol. So in this case, also understanding that you work from that bigger umbrella of the organization is very critical.
This might be as low down as we get in the kind of detail layer here, and then we'll take a bit of a step back to more financial matters, perhaps. But on the cultural piece, there are different ways in which, as a manager, as a leader, we can give feedback, and the right note, the right piece of feedback at the right time, delivered in the right way, is always that kind of golden mantra. But then there are, again, some cultures, some people who would prefer feedback in a different way. Again, is that something that you've had to learn about, to accommodate in your work internationally?
Absolutely. So that is actually my biggest learning in my earlier career, because at that time, as I said, as you also mentioned, I grew up in China until pretty much my career. Okay, before then, it's very much a traditional Asian upbringing. But then my first manager roles was actually abroad in the United States, leading all international team, right, outside of my home country, speaking in a foreign language. And at that time, since I was the manager, and I have to give feedback to my team. And at that time, it has also been a very tough setting. It is an audit setting, internal audit. So you can imagine you are leading a team in an audit setting where no one likes auditor, right, in a way. And then the progress is super fast. You know, you only got a few months of engagement. You have wrapped up everything, finished everything. So that's why timely feedback is super important. But at that time, as you can imagine, the East culture and the West culture in giving feedback is different. Okay, on the East side, we will just think, hey, very direct. Even if it is negative feedback, very direct. You will just say what it is so that the other side can improve. The good thing is considered as given. Okay, you don't really talk about the positive side. You will focus on the negative side so that we can improve. But then later on, I find out, okay, in the American culture, it's actually very different on the way on feedback. Okay, you will tend to emphasize a bit more on the positive side. What can we do? And when it comes to the development feedback, it requires a whole different set of nuances to communicate and let the other side resonate. So at that time, I knew nothing about this. Okay, that's why you can imagine I stumbled on it. Okay, but the beauty now, I can laugh about it. But at that time, it was very, very tough. But those are the things as an international leader, whether you are leading a team different to your culture, is to be very, very mindful about that.
I saw that you run a blog on WeChat, and well, with thanks to Google Translate, other translation services are available. I did take a look at that, and I couldn't help but notice that you made a lot of observations, and maybe this was in the time when you were first embedded in these different countries, different cultures, different experiences, but a lot of cultural observations on, I'm thinking of one where you talk about the role of small talk across different cultures, for example. I find that fascinating because being British, small talk about the weather, it's kind of a cultural norm. We don't even think about it. I think it's because we do genuinely care about the weather on a day-to-day basis. But I can understand how in other parts of the world, A, people don't like talking about weather quite so much, but B, that whole concept of small talk, this easing into a conversation might be somewhat foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is like how we picked up. Because to your point, each culture probably have their own default mode of building relationship. The way that, we build relationship back in my home country, home culture versus here is very different. So in this case, the tips is just to focus and observe how your surrounding environment works and then adapt to it in a way. So that is what we call culture fit, right? And then we always follow that. Whenever where you are in different places, you try to fit in. And that is the conventional way of talking about adapting into a culture. But here, I also wanted to add another point as I grow into this journey is the notion of culture add. Okay, so in here, it comes into this diversity thinking, because it's not only just about fitting in, which you should in a way, but also never forget the additional viewpoint, the additional perspective that you can bring because you are from a different culture, because that is what I call the culture add. And then this point is often omitted, and sometimes it's even being viewed as a disadvantage, which at the moment, right, in the past, when I was growing up in my career, sometimes I do face those barriers. And hence now I am at a senior level, I always advocate for this. Right? If you have a team member that is from different places, please ensure that you are not only requiring those people to fit in, but also is to create something for those talent to add, right? What can they bring to your team, to your organization that was not a conventional thing? Learn about, maybe in British, small talk is weather. Can we learn about what are those small talks or in another country? Because that is another way. Culture exchange is another way of small talk, which I tend to use a lot of the time whenever I meet with new people, because I may not feel comfortable in talking about football for UK or baseball in the US, but I find people are usually genuinely interested in something new. And in this case, I will talk about, hey, my fascination on rice, okay, or you guys are doing this. I actually can tell the different quality of rice because that is the Asian culture. So that is another way of icebreaker as well. But there were so many varieties and beauty out there, so that as a leader, whether you are CFO or CEO or manager, so if we can all embrace a little bit of that, I think it's going to make the team's dynamics and perspective a lot more beautiful.
And this fits into another conversation that we've had multiple times here on CFO Playbook around the value of diversity within an organization. But it's not about, like you say, let's have a diverse team and then let's shape them all so that they fit this specific image. It's about celebrating, benefiting from those differences. And from an individual point of view, it's very easy for us to have imposter syndrome, outsider syndrome. But what you're saying there is, no, I may come from a different place, physically, mentally, whatever it might be, and that is my superpower within this team. Let's lean into that and use that to bring whatever value I can.
And that is a very breakthrough and liberation point for myself as well. Okay, because I was those people back in that time, right, trying to fit in, hey, how I can do this, like in the British way. But later on, I find out that doesn't work, because you are who you are, and then you bring the value that probably no one else can bring because they have a different background. So now how can we foster that environment? Because the other thing is, because diversity and different perspectives, sometimes it will cause tensions, because when you may cause conflict. So in this case, it will require us to have the courage to confront. Okay, but those are the innovation thing will then comes in, because if the team's dynamics or the organization dynamics is only one harmony, like no disagreement, no conflict, it will be a happy place. But in this case, can innovation be fostered? Can the organization move forward? And those are the things, I get back to our CFO role. This is the constant thing that I bring to my executive team to say, hey, we have to actually even encourage those debates, right? If everyone say yes, it's probably not a good meeting.
It's a very empowering message. And continuing the theme of empowerment and coming back more specifically to some of the challenges that as a CFO you face, practically as a multinational or global facing CFO, or maybe even a regional CFO, like somewhere like Europe, where you sit atop, it can be a challenge to be across the regulation, the legislation, all of the important things that can shape your organization in the markets in which they operate. And that's when you have to rely on teamwork, right? So what's your approach to empowering local teams and individuals to step up and take on more responsibility? We've spoken on this show a lot about talent development. So as a kind of global senior CFO, what responsibility do you feel to keep that talent pipeline pumping?
Yeah. That is a very big topic, okay? It's also very important, absolutely. So I think the key thing for me to view about this is before empowering the team, the first question up front we should ask is actually whether we have the right team in the right position. It's only when you have the right people with the right skill set and expertise in the right position, then empowerment can come into the picture. Okay, you mentioned about regulation and some of these other techniques. That for me is a very typical thing. I don't know enough about all this because my background is internal consultancy, internal audit. I may know some of this. But when it comes to the exact nuances, I have to rely on the team. And in this case, like my controller and our government affairs and some other exec member. So in this case, it's also already beyond a CFO's thinking, because the other side of the good CFO is to be the sounding board to the CEO. So in this case, whether we have the right skill set that on the team that is complement with each other is always the step number one to assess. Okay, and once we conclude, okay, this is the right team with the right skill set, so to solve those technical and specific expertise area that we require, then trust them and empower them and figure out a mechanism to measure the outcome of it so that we hold people accountable. And that empowerment and accountability always go hands in hand. And then we have to put the right people in the right position so that we know the credibility is there. And that is paramount.
Speak about building the right team there, having the right talent in place. You've recently been revealed as a judge for the Hot Topics Global CFO 100 Awards for 2024. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've been asked to be on the panel for awards in the past, and I found it both a privilege and a very daunting experience. And I wonder what are the top traits that you are looking for from global CFOs who have been nominated for the awards?
So for me, the best CFO is good in both operational side as well as strategic side. So maybe a few data points here, according to some study. So the global leader, if you think about roughly 70% are very operational centered and about 20% are strategic centered. It's only 10% can do both. So that is the 10% that I will be looking for that can be good both in operational side, day-to-day, running the show, make sure that we look after our organization's financial health and ensure efficiency. At the same time, can always have that bigger picture thinking, be the co-pilot to the CEO and the other executive team to steer the strategy, how the company should be or how your region, no matter which scope that you are responsible for, to make sure that you can be that architect to define how things can go. So have a combination of these two things is very critical. And that has a different context, okay? Because if you are a CFO for a startup, the attribute for balancing these two sides is probably very different if you are a CFO in a mature 100 years old organization. Okay, in this case, you probably wouldn't be the top CFO or the group CFO, but there are in those organizations have CFO at different layers and product line. But the skill set between these two type of organization, despite that you may hold the same CFO title, but the requirement on how you demonstrate those attributes will probably be very different. So in that case, the context is very important when we are reviewing or assessing the candidates.
Yes, I can see a Venn diagram in my mind there as you describe the operational and the strategic role, and that kind of magic overlap between them being the Goldilocks zone, if you like, that you are particularly looking for. You also mentioned there the role in relation to the CEO and how co-pilot, I think you called it. And I know that you spoke recently at the World Finance Forum where you shared some of the key traits as you see them to being a successful CFO. I'm curious, obviously you mentioned there that operational and strategic. How do you define those key traits?
Yeah. So I think one center idea of that stakeholders map that I shared at the World Finance Forum is an excellent finance function doesn't exist in a vacuum. It always exists in a certain context. And that is where the 5 stakeholders comes into the picture. We talked about CEO, be the co-pilot of the CEO, because if without them, then you can't play the strategic role effectively. And then the second one is the your partnering functions. Because finance is just one of the many functions. And despite that, we can say, hey, how critical CFO is, but this one is not only for us to just say we are adding value to the business. We need to let our other functions acknowledging and partnering with us. And then in order to build a relationship and so that the whole organization can go together is how I call it, we have to add value to other functions as well, because leadership is about adding value to others. So that they are the second piece. And then the third piece is the team. Because CFO, we can be the super CFO who can do everything. But at the end of the day, as we also touch upon, it's all about the talent in the organization. So how can we upscale their mindset and skill set to allow them to be the mini CFO in no matter which team that they are supporting is another key attribute. So this way, then we cover the manage up, manage down, and manage around, right? And in addition to this part is then the external or internal investors, where you will need to get your resources. If you are a standalone CFO, then your investor is external. But even if you are in a multinational corporation, like what we are talking about today, in that context, you still have investors. So those investors are your headquarters, your parent company, your funding, internal funding, treasury functions. So all of these, we have to influence them in order to get the right resources and support in order to be a good CFO to help your region or help your product line to grow to the next level. Okay, and then the final piece of that framework is the customer side. And when I say customer, it's not only the external customer, it's also the internal customer. And we should never forget that there's one key thing that over time I learned is myself or ourselves is also our customers. Because as a good leader, if you don't look after yourself, you can never look after other people.
Yes. I learned that very early on in fatherhood. Support the mum and support yourself. And that's a great way of also supporting your child as well. If you don't look after yourselves, you can't look after your child. And the same applies to your final point there as well. Mm-hmm. Just coming back to the first one of those about being the CEO's co-pilot, I've also seen you describe that as being a critical friend to the CEO. Just dive into that. Break down those two words for me, if you will, about the importance of both of those.
Yeah, so that I think it is also the other side of another Goldilocks here. Okay, another Goldilocks zone is how can you be a friend, but a critical friend? Because I think for friends, we all can envision is be the supporting side, right? Being there, always there to fulfill whatever the ask is, support them, which is in a way saying yes to most of the stuff. Then the critical side is having the courage to say no and call stop when you see something is not right or not happening towards the right direction. Because a lot of the time, finance, especially in big corporation, we are in a way an independent function. So that is a very, very delicate relationship that we are maintaining, because we are supporting our CEO or general manager, but at the same time, we need to look after what the organization is doing. And here's like where compliance comes into the picture, because the commercial team or the operational team may not be as vigilant as a finance professionals to actually be aware of those other potential minefield that are out there. So as a good CFO, in addition to saying yes for the places that we can say yes, we have to really be careful to be mindful. Okay, if we know there is a trap there, then the whole organization is like, let's go, go, go. Then we need to like call a stop, right? Don't, right? There is the places that you can't go. And that is where the critical lens comes into the picture. And the good CFO have to be able to navigate both sides.
And that requires bravery at times as well, doesn't it? To be that lone voice, perhaps, that is going to say, hang on, we need to stop here because of blah, despite everyone else maybe around the table going full steam ahead with something.
And that is actually the hard part of the CFO job, because everybody would like to hear the praises, right? But when you are playing that critical role, a lot of the time, we are the unpopular voice. And how do we be comfortable, be that unpopular voice, but at the same time, using our influencing skill to get all of our stakeholders that we just talked about, get them on board, is where the tricky task comes into the picture. And then as a good CFO, it's actually no longer about being liked. It's all about being respected. So if we were able to do that both sides, that the goal that we should aim for is being a respected CFO.
As we look forward to the future of finance leadership, what do you think, Huiming, is the most important thing that finance leaders today, and indeed those coming through, should be doing to prepare themselves for what's next, a world that is potentially faster, even more dynamic than it already has been over the last few years, and even a world where decision-making is inevitably going to be supported by more and more artificial intelligence tooling? What sort of things should we be taking on board right now to best prepare ourselves and therefore prepare the companies we're employed by for the future?
So finance function in the past is very much transactional based, operational based. So in the context of all the automation, which has already been years there, now on top of it, AI, machine learning, so those transactional basic groundwork is going away gradually. So then the future of finance is mainly about forward-looking, business partnering, and leadership skill. Okay, how do we equip our talent in the pipeline that have all these attributes so that they can be successful in the new era of all of those technology is the future of finance.
Coming back to your Venn diagram a moment ago about the operational versus the strategic, does that suggest then that the strategic part of that diagram might well get larger than it is right now and outweigh the operational side of the diagram?
Yeah, I think it will definitely get larger, but whether it will outweigh, probably not so soon. Because as long as the world, is still progressing, your execution side of the story will still exist. But it's just a matter of the execution side in the future will be carried out by machine or it will be carried out by human. Okay, maybe the portion of carried out by human will be will be less and less, but then your overarching activities from the organization perspective, you will still have a more operational side versus the strategic side.
Very good. So that strategic thinking, that side of being able to direct things is one thing that we need to think about equipping ourselves with in this future. What are the other areas?
Yeah, well, the other area is about the organization. So we talked about future of the finance function. And then the second part is future of the organization. Because those technology, a lot of the time, are actually impacting the whole business as well. And then the beauty of finance is we see everything. We put aside money to invest in the organization for all of these activities. So in this case, how we should put aside the right amount of focus and investment for the company to be on that journey is another thing. So for example, we invest in AI, for forecasting, for example. And forecasting is pretty much a commercial exercise, right? Beyond finance, right? We are just reviewing the output of those whole forecasts. But if we are in a flow business, then AI statistic model actually can play a much better accurate role potentially, right? In those situations. So in this case, how can we ensure that the organization is putting aside the right investment to enable that is the future of business thinking on this front.
I guess it's very easy, and thinking to what you might be doing now to prepare yourself for this future, it's tempting to think, oh, AI technology, that's the CTO, maybe the CIO, maybe the CISO's role to be across. I'm going to leave them to be understanding it while I get on with what I do. But surely, given what you've spoken about just now and the advisory role, that co-pilot to the CEO and also that partner to the rest of the organization, the responsibility falls on you as the CFO to understand as much about this technology as almost anybody else in the organization.
Absolutely. Because in this case, if we don't understand, then we cannot make the best decision, for the company's future. So that's why that also back to when we say the stakeholder management side on cross-functional collaboration is super key, super key, because CFO, CIO, when it comes to this, or chief digital officer, so we have to work closely together, so that they can understand a case that it will eventually bring profit or bring financial outcome to whatever organization that we are working for. So only in this case, and if the CFO doesn't understand all this, then we may not put aside the right focus when we are trying to invest for future growth. So we have to understand all this. And maybe that brings to another good point come to my mind is the enterprise mindset. Enterprise mindset for a CFO, despite that we grow up in finance in a way, but in order to really achieve the best outcome, we have to think enterprise-wise. When we say enterprise-wise, it's way beyond just a finance function. That go back to what we talked about. Finance cannot exist in a vacuum. The way that we bring value is to connect all of those dots across the organization so that we can make the best decision for the enterprise.
Certainly changes coming. Finally on this, what are you most excited about for this next stage? And, we've seen AI, particularly the generative AI stuff, but AI as a whole over the last 2 or 3 years really gather some momentum. What are you excited about for your role as a CFO about what these new automation, analysis, insight technologies might be able to bring, not only to your role as a CFO, but to the organizations that you work for?
I think it's a tremendous potential there. So one key thing when I think about the new technology is about how do we have a right balance between the prediction and judgment. Because a lot of those new technology is actually helping us to be efficient and effective on the prediction side. Let's say machine learning, giving me Gen AI and all this is give me a prediction in a way. But at the end of the day, we need to have our judgment to think about, okay, what is the right things for the organization to move forward? We can never just blindly trusting whatever the machine or the bot is telling us, because that is just only serve a role to remove manual work in generating those insights, because now you can leverage those machine and those technology to generate the insight. But at the end of the day, the decision making is with the human. So the more that we can make the prediction, manual work inside to generate all this in a quick way, it is just unlocking a lot of the time that senior leadership team have so that we can focus on better judgment and spending time to debate about, okay, what is the best decision outcome versus now at the time we spend so much efforts in crunching through a lot of the groundwork, which is not that value add. So by unlocking that judgment capability is where I am most excited about.
I agree. And I think a lot of the learnings over the next few years will be in that area of understanding where humans still do need to play a part, understanding what can be automated, what we can trust to, however smart the machine's decision-making can be. But it's going to be a case of understanding where humans still need to be involved. And we're going to get it wrong and we're going to get it right. And there will be frameworks that come into play that aren't there right now. But it's certainly a journey that whatever industry we're in, I think we're all going to be going on.
Absolutely. I think that is a very key on the next phase of how we structure our corporation is exactly that framework that you describe. Where can we rely on technology? And where do we need to preserve human decision? And now define who are the people that have the best capability to make that decision on behalf of the organization. Because at the moment, since we don't really have a lot of this, all of the decision in a way is distributed. Everyone do their own groundwork, they make that decision. But in the future, potentially a lot of those groundwork will be centralized by machine or technology, and that individually across the different places could then be making the decision in a more efficient or timely manner.
Finally, for now, a question that we ask every guest on CFO Playbook is what liberating finance means to them. So, Huiming, liberate finance. What does that mean to you?
Liberate finance for me is about empowerment and accountability. By liberating our time, you have to entrust certain things. That could be technology we talked about. That could be talent that we talked about. Finding them and then empower them. Okay? So that could be an automation tool, an automation solution that you leverage and adopt so that you can liberate your team so that they don't need to do all those day-to-day work. So you empower the technology to release those time-crunching work for your team so that they can focus more to become a mini CFO, right? Because at the moment, they do have no time. They are like crunching Excel day in and day out. So by empowering technology, you liberate the team's time. Okay, but you can't just blindly empower, and that's where that accountability comes in. So liberating finance, you also need to have the framework that is driving the accountability. And when I say the framework, you need to still have the right control point in place. This is where we talked about that prediction and judgment and that framework, because you can't just let it run wild. So you have some sort of architect in place so that by combining that empowerment side of thing and having the right accountability framework is how I then view the finance capability can be liberated so that they can be more of a co-pilot, they can be more of a mini CFO, they can be more of all the other stakeholder management, which at the moment we are still having some step to go.
I love the thought that's gone into that. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
There is another key thing in that journey of liberating finance or liberating our productivity is the experiment mindset. It is so key. Experiment. Don't wait for anything to be perfect to do it, because that perfect moment is just never come because we are constantly in making. And the one saying that I really, really like that I would like to share at the end is, when a crazy idea works, is called innovation. When a crazy idea doesn't work, it's called experiment. And both are good things, right? Because you have to have these things go hands in hand. Experiment is there, so one day innovation can be achieved. So we have to keep that open mind and have those mindset so that we progress.
Huiming Chen, thank you so much for joining us today on CFO Playbook Podcast.
No, thank you, David, for having me.